Secret Invasion just finished airing its 6 episode run. And now begins that time of the year where everybody is once again asking, is now the time to reboot the MCU? Because Secret Invasion happens to be the latest of what seems to be just an ongoing string of projects that's underwhelming. It seems to either lack a sense of overall direction, or certainly it feels like we're in this post Endgame lull where the MCU doesn't quite know where it wants to go. So, I mean, let me start by asking you this, Angelina. Did you actually watch Secret Invasion? Did you even hear
No,
that it was going
I
on?
don't even know what it is.
Okay.
It's
So
like, I don't even know what it is.
and so I'll give you a quick summary, but like I think just the fact
Okay.
that you didn't even hear about it
I'm
is
like,
a good,
huh?
because this is where I think the MCU, when it was at the peak of its powers, even people who weren't like avid fans of Marvel knew what was going on. They were like, "Oh yeah, that
Mm.
Captain America movie that's coming. Oh yeah, Civil War. Yeah, I know what it's about. The airport
Yeah.
fight." Like people knew that even if they weren't like even if they didn't know all the details. So Secret Invasion is a show where it's adapting the comic book story of the same name, where the Skrulls, which we saw in Captain Marvel, like the green looking aliens, they were kicked off their own planet by the Kree, which were the blue looking aliens. And so basically they were refugees in Captain Marvel. And so Nick Fury, Sam Jackson's character, he basically promised them a planet in Captain Marvel. And so now, like 20 odd years later, because the Captain Marvel takes place in the 90s, Nick Fury has gone through, the Avengers and all of that stuff. The world has almost, the blip and everything. And
Yeah.
so he's got a bit of PTSD because he got blipped and then he came back. And so they kind of explored that in the show. But the central focus of the story is that the Skrulls, there's a faction in the Skrulls that is mad at Fury for basically never finding them a planet for their species, these millions of Skrulls, who are basically at this point without a planet and they're refugees. And so they want to now take over Earth and make that their planet. And they're like, humans are destroying this planet anyway, so we might as well, just turn up the heat and we're going to do a better job of taking care of this planet, and we need a home, might as well be Earth. So the whole point of the show is that, it's a little bit of a what is it, the Body Snatchers kind of a spy political thriller where the Skrulls can shapeshift into anybody. So, any Skrull could look like anyone. So they seemingly have infiltrated like these world leaders. And like if you remember War Machine, like Rhodey, Iron Man's best friend, we find out,
Mm.
and spoiler alert for anybody who has not watched this, but like Rhodey is a Skrull too, as we find out. But ultimately where the show goes, it's very underwhelming because by the end of the show, it seemed, it just felt like there was this one bad actor who ultimately ended up getting killed off by the end of the show, and that's it. So you walk away from the show really without any kind of like significant story development. And if you are yawning
Yeah.
at that description, then I will tell you will probably turn the show off after the first few episodes.
Yeah, no.
So my question to you becomes like having me describe that, and then looking at the recent output of the MCU, whether it's Guardians of the Galaxy, which I think Volume 3 was fantastic. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. But outside of that, things like She-Hulk or like, Moon Knight, which couldn't stick the landing. There's so many
Yeah.
projects that, and even like Hawkeye or Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
I kind of like Hawkeye, but it was like take it or leave it. She-Hulk,
Yeah,
I watched like 2 episodes of, and I was just like, no.
it wasn't
And then
that
I
funny.
actually was rewatching the MCU. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
rewatching the MCU. I watched WandaVision. I watched so I watched it all the way through, right? Like all of the major shows and everything. Took me a few months to do it, but I had surgery, like I had time. I just got really exhausted after not Stranger Things, Doctor
Doctor
Strange.
Strange, Multiverse of Madness. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I loved me some Stranger Things, guys. That's not what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Doctor Strange, yeah, that after that I had to take a break. I was just so like, oh god, it's the same story over and over again. And then you have like Endgame, and obviously some of our favorite superheroes are finito after
Hmm.
Endgame. And so it's like emotionally exhausting. It's also just like it's kind of the same story over and over and over again. And nothing pivotal is happening
Yeah.
after Endgame.
It's
So Doctor Strange was like good, but also I have questions because it's so contradictory of WandaVision, and I liked WandaVision, but like, where is Vision? Where
right.
is he? It just like, I have so many questions,
Yeah.
and so I needed to take a break
Yeah,
because it just wasn't. Yeah.
Because like Vision, because well, at the end of WandaVision, like it seems like Scarlet Witch has kind of gone through her recovery. Like Wanda Maximoff is becoming like coming to be at peace with where she is, and then they show this one scene at the end, this cutaway, like this post-credit scene at the end of the series, which is like, oh, she found the Darkhold and she's actually now becoming evil. And then when you start Doctor Strange into Multiverse of Madness, she's completely evil by that point. So it's a little jarring that, after spending so much time investing in her story, you completely disregarded all of that progress she made as a character.
Yeah.
But also, if you did not watch WandaVision, you would be totally lost at the start of Doctor Strange, because you'd be like, wait a second, what? Because the last time we saw her, she was with the Avengers helping save the world. Like, what the heck happened? So
what happened?
And then the Vision, like they have this, this new version of Vision at the end of WandaVision. So not the one that we are familiar with, who died in the Avengers movies, but then we get like this new body, who's kind of like a fresh beginning, but like he is like, I'm gonna go find myself. But he shows up nowhere in Doctor Strange, and so I don't know if that romance, that history between Wanda and Vision is ever going to be revisited again. It's one of those things where, again, like you said, it just feels so scattered and there's nothing significant happening. And whenever, like even Secret Invasion, it just feels like another PTSD show where the world of the MCU is still just recovering or seemingly traumatized by the events of Avengers, Endgame, and Infinity War. And they just can't seem to be able to move past those ideas or establish something new that is significant, that isn't tied to what has happened before. And it just, after a while, I think and it also, I think, reflects on where the world is today, because we're coming out of the pandemic and it feels like people are finally ready to be like, I'm done talking about the pandemic. I just want to, at this point, move forward.
Yeah.
And so I think the MCU having this very dour tone, this holding on to the past, it just starting to become a drag on the continuity. So yeah, and then the X-Men, we keep getting promised that we're going to get X-Men, but like they're nowhere to be found. And there's, for the very few highlights we get every once in a while, like Miss Marvel or Shang-Chi. Now the sequel to Miss Marvel, I don't know if there's going to be a season 2. She's going to be in the Marvels movie, but that's not her movie per se. She's part of the movie. And then Shang-Chi, the sequel, is probably not going to happen for years because the director of Shang-Chi is working on the next Avengers movie. So I just don't. And then, like you said, there's no overall direction. Like back in the halcyon days of the MCU.
It was all leading up to Endgame.
Exactly.
And then Endgame happened, and I just don't understand how it took so many years. Like, why didn't they start thinking past that? They had the time,
right?
They had the drive. They had everything at their they had everything there to think past and forward, and they didn't, which is weird to me. Like, did they really just think hey, we're done with the money, we're gonna stop now?
And
what?
I mean, they say that they have plans, and then all these phase things. But here's one thing that I have always said, which I think is a lot of people don't take seriously because they're like, oh, well, of course, it's the opposite is true. But I don't think the MCU has ever been as well planned out or as well connected as people give it credit for. And while Kevin Feige is a genius for having, gotten us this far, I do think there's been a lot of luck on his side and a lot of, good filmmakers who have come in and done a good job while working within the limits of what they've been given.
And I definitely think you see that because you have to think back to Fantastic Four.
Mm-hmm.
They had no idea what was going on back then. Yeah. And they completely act like that movie never even happened because they recast one of the characters as Captain America. They literally act like it never happened.
That they might,
which is so funny.
That was a Fox movie, right? So I bet you that then when they do bring in the Fantastic Four into the MCU, they're probably going to do some multiverse angle where they're going to tie it into those Fantastic Four movies. And
just like they did with Spider-Man?
Yeah, exactly. Like a gimmicky thing where they're here comes Jessica Alba and
I feel like they have to. I loved Jessica Alba.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Sorry. So it's always so funny to me because it's like they really had no direction until after Iron Man. And you can even see in the first Iron Man, they're very careful about what they talk about because like they didn't know. So really until Iron Man 2 came out, that's when everything starts picking up speed and you get all of these other like connecting pieces. But it's still, well, I don't know. I think you're right. I think honestly, they haven't planned it out as well as they should have. And maybe that's because there's too many seats at the table. Like, I'm sure it's like a constant argument of like, well, no, we should do this, we should do that, we should do this, we should do that. And then you have each of the script writers. Like, I'm sure that there are way too many seats at the table to really have a actual conversation about this stuff. But at this point, it's truly just at their own expense. And I don't understand the why.
I think part of the reason is back in the early days, they were just working on make each project really good, and that gives us the ability to do the next thing. And then they kept building on top of each movie and got to the Avengers, and then things just kept getting better and better. And they kept delivering on the quality side of the story so that they had the chance to keep doing more and more. What has happened, I think, of late is they've established this really big writer's room that like you referenced, and because of simply the volume of projects that they're putting out, Kevin Feige, who used to have creative control and oversight over everything, and he was still like probably working 7 days a week, 15-hour days. There's just no way today that he can give that kind of oversight and that kind of have that kind of control where it's one singular vision that's directing everything that's happening in the MCU, because there's just too much going on. So what you tend to have happen is like like a show like Secret Invasion happens, then the director of the main producer, the showrunner says, "Oh yeah, Rhodey was probably a Skrull since Civil War. Yeah, we'll go with that." And then without necessarily really putting in the thought behind, so now the audiences are supposed to believe that Rhodey in Endgame, when Tony Stark is there dying and he's like, comes up to him and he says, "Hey, it's going to be okay now." And they have that really emotional moment. And now we're supposed to believe that Don Cheadle, who played that earnestly as Rhodey, we were meant that he was a Skrull. So it kind of like it spits in the face of the audiences that you have emotionally invested themselves in your franchise for so long, when you decide to retcon something simply because you wanted to have that shock value in a show like Secret Invasion, which clearly does not mean nearly as much to the audiences emotionally as something like Avengers Endgame did. So I think at this point, they're just damaging their brand by trying to somehow tie these. I'm like, don't retcon anything, move forward, like stop living in the past. I'm tired of them talking about the blip. I'm like, it happened. I get it. Like, this is where we are today. But like Captain America Brave New World is going to be all about more repercussions of the blip. And right now, after watching Secret Invasion, I'm just less excited about that movie, because I'm like, that movie could have been a new start for the character, but now it's just going to be rehashing everything we've already seen before.
Well, looking at the MCU and what it's happening, like, what is the timeline for all of this? And obviously everything is affected by the strike too. So it's like, realistically, what is the next project we're going to get? What is it? Where are we going? Well,
I think like the next...
It feels like they have so many projects slated, but like nothing's finalized.
Yeah, it's completely a mess at this point, because there's like movies like Blade that have gotten like 5 false starts, and Mahershala Ali at this point was announced as the new Blade 5 years ago, I think. So I don't know when that movie is ever going to happen, because they hired a new writer and then the writer's been on strike and then the movie got shut down.
Can you imagine getting cast in a role, aging 5 years, and then still having to play this role that you booked 5 years ago?
Yeah,
I would lose my marbles.
Yeah, and not to mention, like, these guys have to get into really good shape. So they're like, or even like Deadpool, right? Deadpool was in the middle of filming Deadpool 3, and then Hugh Jackman came back to play Wolverine, which is fantastic. I think it would be great to finally see those two guys on screen with Ryan Reynolds. But now that movie that got shut down, we don't know how many months is gonna, the actor strike is gonna last. So Hugh Jackman's gonna have to get back into like Wolverine shape again.
Well, not back. You just have to stay in shape.
Well, stay in shape.
It's like,
but like
at that point, you can't let it go.
No, but you like the amount of,
but like you can't let it go.
No, but the amount of work that they put in to get because if you've seen like his routine before, he's not just like staying in shape. He's getting jacked.
No, I know. You have to eat like 5,000
Yeah.
calories a day. You're eating like weird
Which,
stuff. I was on the men's rowing team in
yeah.
college. I understand.
So
I
like
get
at
it.
his
I was
age,
like,
like it's can you imagine the toll that it
yeah.
takes on your body, especially if you're gonna because here's the thing, there's no end in sight right
But
now
I'm more
to
worried
the
about like
strike.
what he does too, because he's been consistently either filming a movie or on Broadway.
Yeah.
And this seems like the best opportunity for him to go back to
Broadway,
Broadway.
yeah.
And he's like waiting around to
For
see if they're gonna film
yeah.
this role that's now like, it's like,
Like he was in
oh
London
God.
filming when the strike started, and so they're like, well, we
And
can't
I'm
do
like,
anything
oh
now.
man.
Well,
So yeah, it's a little.
and then like Disney had to push back all their Avengers movies, like the Avengers, Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars, which I sincerely hope at this point that if they at least start considering rejigging some of their plans, and then hopefully one of these new Avengers movies ends up being a complete reset, and then we start anew. Like we start with either a soft reboot or a full hard reboot, because it's just not working right now.